Welcome to the Midnight Library. I am your librarian, and the world has finally gone quiet enough for a story. Today, we step into the vault to uncover a tale of darkness. Take a deep breath, leave the world behind, and let's begin. The invitation had arrived in an envelope that smelled of a salt and old cedar. It was a heavy cream colored parchment that felt slightly damp to the touch, as if it had been pulled from the bottom of a cold, forgotten sea. It was an invitation to the estate of Julian Wayne, a man who had spent 40 years collecting things the rest of the world wanted to forget. Julian was dead now. His house, a jagged tooth of a mansion perched on the crumbling cliffs of Blackwood Bay, was being emptied. I arrived at dusk. The sky was the color of a fresh brush, purple, heavy, and sullen with the threat of rain. Inside the mansion, the air was thick with the scent of floor wax and rot. The auctioneer stood on a small wooden dais. He was a skeletal man with eyes like polished buttons and skin that looked like crinkled tissue paper. This, the auctioneer whispered, his voice crackling like dry kindling in a winter fire, is the mirror of sorrows. It has no known artist, it has no known age, it has only one rule. You must never hang it facing a window. I looked at the item. It was a large rectangle draped in a heavy black velvet shroud. I could not see the frame, yet I felt a strange humming heat radiating from it. The room went silent. No one else bid. They looked at the shroud as if it were a funeral cloth. I, I bought it for pence. When I returned to my apartment, the city was silent. I placed the painting on a heavy oak easel in the center of my study. I poured a glass of wine, my heart thumping a strange, irregular rhythm against my ribs. I reached for the velvet. With one slow, heavy motion, I pulled the shroud away. The painting was a masterpiece of shadow. It depicted a room, a study almost identical to mine, but the colors were sickly. The walls were a brushed indigo, and the floor beds looked like they were made of bone. In the center of the painted room stood a tall, high backed chair. The chair was empty. I laughed at the no windows rule. It seemed like a cheap trick designed to frighten the superstitious. I left the painting where it was, directly across from my floor to ceiling window, and I went to sleep. I woke up at 3:14 a.m. The air in my bedroom was freezing, so cold that my breath came out in white fumes. I heard it then, a soft rhythmic scratch. I grabbed a flashlight and walked into the study. The beam of light cut through the darkness and hit the canvas. I gasped, nearly dropped the light. The chair in the painting was no longer empty. A figure was sitting in it. It was a man seen from behind. He was leaning over a desk, writing feverishly with a quill pen. I leaned in closer, my breath fogged the surface of the oil paint. The man in the painting was wearing the same silk robe I was wearing at that very moment, even though coffee stain on his left sleeve was identical to mine. Over the next week, the painting changed every time I blinked. On Tuesday, the painted man turned his head. I could see the edge of a jawline. It was my jawline. On Wednesday, a door appeared in the background of the painting. The door was slightly ajar, and a hand, pale grey, elongated, was reaching through the crack. I tried to move the painting. I tried to cover it, but the velvet shroud was gone. I couldn't find it anywhere. When I tried to turn the easel toward the wall, the painting felt as heavy as a mountain. It wouldn't budge an inch. I was being watched by a version of myself that was running out of time. I remember the auctioneer's warning. Never hang it facing a window. Moonlight was pouring through my window, hitting the canvas directly. The light seemed to be feeding the oil, making the colors pulse like a heartbeat. The grey hand in the painting was now resting on the painted man's shoulder. The man in the painting looked terrified. His eyes, my eyes, were wide, staring out of the canvas, pleading with me to save him. The creature in the painting had fully emerged from the door. It was a thing of ink and bone, its face a smooth, featureless mask of white porcelain. It was leaning down, its mouth opening close to the painted man's ear. I ran to the window to pull the heavy strips. I had to kill the light, but as my hand touched the fabric, I looked at the glass of the window. In the reflection, I didn't see my apartment. I saw the painted room. The floor beneath me didn't feel like carpet anymore. It felt like dry, brittle parchment. The smell of my study had changed. It no longer smelled of coffee. It smelled of salt and old cedar. I looked down at my hands. They were becoming flat. My skin was turning the color of brushed purple and sickly green. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was nothing more than rustle of wind over a dry canvas. I looked out from the frame. I saw the door to my study open. A tall figure entered, the auctioneer. He wasn't skeletal anymore. He looked towering, his eyes glowing like embers. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with the satisfaction of a master artist. He picked up a paintbrush, dipped it into a jar of thick, glowing crimson ink, and stepped toward me. Perfect likeness, the auctioneer whispered, the pride of the collection. With one swift motion, he painted a heavy iron bird door over the exit of the room in the painting. I threw myself against the painted wood, but I was nothing but pigment. I watched through the window of the canvas as he pulled the heavy velvet shroud back over the frame. Total darkness swallowed me. I heard the easel being dragged across the floor, then the sound of a heavy vault door slamming shut. High above in the world of the living, the apartment sat empty. The window remained open, and a soft breeze blew through the study, no knocking over an empty wine glass. The glass shattered on the floor, but there was no one left to hear it. The mirror of sorrows had found its reflection, and that library was, for one brief moment, complete. The book is closed, and the vault is locked, at least for tonight. If you found a home in these shadows, please subscribe and leave a light in the comments so I can find you again. I'm your librarian, and I will be waiting for you at the next midnight. Sleep well.